I never imagined that a routine late-night shift at work could unravel into a nightmarish ordeal that would leave me questioning my own senses. It was a chilly Wednesday evening in New York City, and I was the last person in our 20-story office building, a modern glass structure that normally pulsed with energy during the day, now reduced to a hollow, echoing shell after business hours. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the hum of the HVAC system and the distant sound of traffic outside. I settled into my cubicle on the 17th floor, determined to finish a project before heading home. But as the hours slipped by, I began to notice things that defied logical explanation. It started with small disturbances. The fluorescent lights above my desk flickered intermittently, casting erratic shadows across my workspace. I attributed it to faulty wiring or the building's age, but soon, more unsettling signs emerged. I heard soft footsteps echoing in the deserted hallways, steps that seemed too measured, too deliberate, as if someone was pacing the corridors with intent. At first, I told myself it was simply the building settling or the sound of distant maintenance crews, yet the sensation of being watched grew steadily stronger. I'd catch brief glimpses of movement in the reflection of the glass walls, always at the periphery of my vision, and every time I looked up, I found nothing but emptiness. As the night deepened, my unease mounted. I received an anonymous email on my work account with a single, cryptic line, "You're not alone here." My heart raced as I scanned the message, wondering if it was a cruel prank or a warning. Trying to stay rational, I continued typing, but the sound of a door creaking open down the hall made me freeze. I slowly rose from my desk and walked toward the corridor, each step echoing loudly in the near total darkness. The office was deserted, every door locked, every office empty. Yet the feeling of someone following me was unmistakable, a presence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. At one point, as I passed by a row of closed offices, I caught sight of a figure standing at the end of the hall. The person was dressed in dark clothing, his features obscured by shadows. I blinked, and when I looked again, he was gone. Panic and adrenaline surged through me. I retreated to my cubicle and, with trembling hands, dialed 911. I explained in a hushed, urgent tone that I believed there was an intruder in the building. The operator's calm voice reassured me that help was on the way, but each passing minute stretched into an eternity. Within what felt like moments, I heard the sound of sirens approaching the building's exterior. Soon after, the distant murmur of voices and the soft thud of footsteps in the corridor signaled that the police had arrived. I stayed in my cubicle, heart hammering, as I listened to the officers methodically sweep through the hallways. Through the peephole of the security door, I caught glimpses of uniformed figures moving with deliberate caution. I heard one officer call out, "Clear," followed by hushed exchanges and the shuffling of boots on the polished floor. After what seemed both an eternity and mere minutes, the police finally reached my floor. An officer, his voice low and steady, announced that they had detained a man lurking in a storage room near the eastern wing, a man whose presence was inexplicable and whose intentions remained murky. I wanted to feel relief, to embrace the safety that the police arrival should have brought, but the experience left me with a disquieting void instead. The intruder was led away in handcuffs, and though the building gradually returned to a semblance of order, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something that defied easy explanation. Even now, as I recall that night, the memory is tinged with an unsettling ambiguity. Was it simply a deranged trespasser taking advantage of an empty building, or was there something else, a subtle anomaly that can never be fully understood? Story 2. I moved into my new apartment with high hopes for a fresh start, a modest one-bedroom on a quiet street in a Midwestern town. The place was old, with creaking floors and faded wallpaper, but it had character. On my first night, as I unpacked and arranged my few belongings, I couldn't shake the sensation of being observed. I attributed it to nerves and the unfamiliar surroundings, but the feeling persisted. At around 11 p.m., while I was making dinner, I heard a faint sound, a soft rustling in the living room that I couldn't explain. I paused mid-chop, listened intently, then convinced myself it was nothing more than the old building settling. Yet later that night, when I was in bed reading by the dim light of a bedside lamp, I distinctly heard footsteps in the hallway. The sound was measured and deliberate, as if someone were pacing outside my door. I sat up, heart thumping, and waited for it to resume. When it didn't, I told myself it was just my imagination. In the days that followed, small things began to add up. I'd return from work to find my keys not where I left them, or notice that a book had been moved from the shelf to a spot on the floor. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of movement at the edge of my vision, a shadow passing behind the living room curtain, a door that I was certain I had closed now slightly ajar. I rationalized each occurrence, blaming my fatigue or misremembering, yet the persistent unease grew with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, I decided to secure the apartment more carefully. I double-checked the locks, closed the curtains, and even taped the peephole shut. As I settled into bed, the silence of the night was thick. Then, just as I was drifting off, I heard a quiet murmur coming from the living room. It wasn't a clear voice or any obvious sound. It was more like a sigh, soft and almost sorrowful. I lay there motionless, straining to catch any more detail, but it vanished as quickly as it had come. The next morning, I found no signs of forced entry or disturbance, only subtle hints. A single coffee cup left on a counter that I was sure I'd put away, and a faint indentation on the armrest of my sofa. I began to wonder if I was simply losing my mind. Could it be that I was imagining everything? Yet, every time I closed my eyes, I felt that invisible presence, as if someone were sharing my space without ever being seen. Late one night, when I was too restless to sleep, I crept out of bed and tiptoed toward the living room. The dim light revealed nothing unusual. No one was there, no movement, nothing that would explain the constant feeling of intrusion. But as I passed the hallway mirror, I caught a flash of something behind me, a movement that vanished the moment I turned. I froze, heart pounding, the rational part of my mind battling with the creeping terror of the unknown. I spent weeks in that apartment, haunted by these inexplicable signs. I tried to document everything, jotting down dates and details, yet there was never any concrete evidence of another presence, only the inexplicable misplacement of items, the soft whispers of footsteps, and that persistent sensation of being watched. I eventually moved out, unable to shake the feeling that something unseen had shared my space. Even now, years later, I sometimes wonder if it was all in my head or if I truly had an unseen roommate, one whose quiet, unexplainable presence left a lasting chill in my memory. Story 3. I've always taken the same morning train from New York City to my office in Jersey, a reliable routine that framed the start of my day. That is, until one unusually overcast morning when everything changed in a way I can't fully explain. As I boarded the train at Penn Station, I noticed a man sitting near the end of the carriage. His appearance was unremarkable, dressed in a well-worn jacket, his eyes fixed on the window, but something about his presence felt off. I couldn't place it, but I felt a subtle dissonance in the air, as if reality had momentarily slipped. During the journey, I observed that whenever the train passed through a tunnel, I would catch a glimpse of a figure standing at the far end of the carriage, a face, briefly illuminated by the passing lights, that wasn't accounted for by any other passenger. At first, I assumed it was simply a trick of the dim lighting and my own weary eyes. But as the train continued its route, the fleeting appearances became more frequent, and the figure's presence more distinct, always there for just a moment before vanishing into darkness. I found myself increasingly distracted, my mind racing with the possibility that I was witnessing something unexplainable. I tried to focus on my work, but the intermittent, unexplained glances kept pulling me back to that mysterious presence. The conductor announced our arrival at a small station in northern New Jersey, and as the train slowed, the fleeting figure was nowhere to be seen. I dismissed it as a trick of the light or perhaps a fellow traveler I had simply overlooked. Over the next few days, I began to notice odd details in my daily commute: a seat that I was sure had been empty one morning, a faint smell of cologne in a section of the carriage that always smelled musty, and an unsettling sensation that someone was watching me, even when the train was nearly empty. I even retrieved a short audio clip from my phone's recording app, hoping to capture any hint of the inexplicable whispers I thought I'd heard. The clip was inconclusive, a mix of ambient noise and what might have been indistinct murmurs, but nothing definitive. One morning, determined to get to the bottom of it, I chose a different seat, a spot directly in view of the carriage's window, and watched every passenger intently. I sat there for the entire ride, my eyes scanning the shadows, waiting for that elusive presence to reappear. And then it happened. As the train passed through a long, dark tunnel, I saw it, a brief flash of a face, looking directly at me, eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't decipher, before dissolving into the darkness. I sat frozen, heart pounding, the image seared into my mind. I never saw the figure again after that day, yet the memory remains. The vanishing commuter was never mentioned by other passengers, and no one could offer a logical explanation for the fleeting appearances. I'm left with the unsettling feeling that sometimes, on our daily journeys, there are moments when the ordinary slips away, revealing something transient and inexplicable that defies easy explanation. Whether it was a trick of the mind or an unintentional glimpse into a hidden layer of reality, I still wonder. The experience has left me with a lingering uncertainty, a reminder that even in the most mundane routines, there can be moments that shake the very fabric of what we consider normal.